want to share with you a little bit tonight, just a real short piece from one of my early mentors. When I first moved to California in 1978, I was working for California First Bank, which was owned by the Bank of Tokyo. And on my lunch hour, I would walk over to the Embarcadero Center in downtown San Francisco, and I would go to the B. Dalton bookstore. And of course, I would be, led and guided right over to the New Age, mystical kind of section of the bookstore. And one day on my lunch hour in 1981, I saw this image of this woman with beautiful blonde hair. And the title of the book was What You Think of Me Is None of My Business. Now, I didn't buy the book. I didn't even read the book. But I was still drawn to the book for some reason. And if you remember in bookstores, oftentimes when you would look at the bookcase, there'd be several books where you would just see the spine, and about a third of the way down, there'd be other books turned out so you could see the front of the cover of the book. Well, that very first time I went there and discovered the book, her book was turned out. But after another week or so, that book was turned, and so it was just the spine. So it was my job to put in the correction. So every time I went in, I would take liberty, spread the books apart, turn her books out so it would face out, and then I'd go on about my business. And that led me to discovering on KRON TV, Channel 4 in San Francisco, on Sunday mornings, I stumbled across Terry Cole-Whittaker. She had a half-hour program each Sunday morning, and it brought together science, theology, and psychology. And I loved that program. A few weeks later, she's speaking at the Marin Civic Center over in San Rafael, and I went to see it with my best friend, Gary. Wonderful speech, wonderful conversation. And at the end of the conversation, we got to be in a reception line, and I got to meet Terry. And after we walked through, my friend Gary looked at me and said, I want to do these classes, and I want us to do them together because I do not want to grow spiritually without you. So we signed up for a class that was called Mastery in Living. And on our first night, I've told some of you this, we were late getting to the Cathedral Hill Hotel. There were 400 people in the room for this first class. When we walked in, the person at the door said, well, I think there are 2 empty seats over there on that side. Go sit there. And we walked over, and we saw this attractive, beautiful Black woman. And I asked, are these seats taken? And she said, they are now. You're here. Sit down. And that was the night I met Reverend Dr. Andrea Earl. So it started this trajectory on my spiritual path for the last 40 years. So this morning, I got an email from Terry Cole-Whittaker, and I wanted to share one of the little attachments that was in the email.
And what I think of you is none of your business because it's coming from the mind. It's basically, how do we feel about each other? And when we know how to trust our feelings, not the emotions, but the feelings that come directly from our own inner guidance, then we always make right choices. I'll read something to you. When you think that you have lost or failed, then the person tends to exaggerate the experience. If we're honest, we realize that we don't fail all of the time, and that in most of these failures, there are positive lessons for growth and opportunity. And when you know that what they think of you is none of your business, instead of trying to change their mind, you then fill your mind with high thoughts, because we create through our thoughts. So only think that you desire to create. Good advice.
For some of you to get a glimpse of Terry and you know who she is today. She had a thriving, large ministry that would probably what we would today compare to Michael Beckwith's ministry and Agape in Southern California, in the sense that it was a very large megachurch in San Diego, California. But Terry's real big claim to fame prior to cable television out of Atlanta, Georgia, was a television station called the Superstation. And it was called the Superstation, but it was syndicated across the country. That Superstation eventually became CNN. But in a lot of the smaller markets, you could get what was called across the country a couple of superstations, WOR in Chicago, and you know, that station in Atlanta, and I forget the station in New York, but there was one in the like the 5 major cities across the country, and Terry was on all of them. So that meant, if you think back at a time where there were limited amount of TV stations across the country, she probably averaged, you know, 2 or 3 million people every Sunday morning watching her program. But she has dedicated the last 20 years of her life living in Washington, living out with nature, and just studying and writing and doing little clips such as that. On our website, elderprideforme.org, is an article that Terry wrote that accompanied the video today. And she asked that we share it with our communities. And so I wanted to share her with our community, and I invite you to go to elderprideforme.org to read her latest column and a link to her YouTube video channel. I think you might enjoy it. But that was how all of this began. And if you think about it, what you think about me is none of my business could really very well be the preamble to the 4 agreements, because it really goes hand in hand of what we think about one another means nothing. You know, how we feel about one another, how we feel about ourselves when we're in the company of one another is the thing that gives us that experience of being in a safe community for growth, a safe place to ask questions, to ponder what's next for our life, help us to understand how we got from where we are to where we want to be, or better yet, how to get from where we are to where we want to be. So there's that opportunity, you know. And one of the things she said, even in this clip, is we're going to fail from time to time. And so we can honor this 4th agreement, knowing that when we do our best, always, sometimes it would be easy to call something that happened on that trajectory as failure. But as other leaders have said, sometimes a setback is just a set up for something even better to come along in life. But the other thing that we have often heard and we have often talked about is you learn the most in life from the failures. You learn the most in life from the decisions you made when things didn't quite go the way that you wanted them to. You know the importance of being impeccable with your word because you've already experienced when you weren't impeccable with your word, or somebody else was not impeccable with their word to you, and what the consequences was of that. And so therefore you learned from that. You made some decisions from that. You've already learned in your spiritual journey what happens when you take things personally, only to find out at the end it had nothing to do with you. You may very well think that that angry, disappointed customer service rep that you talked to on the phone is mad at you. The truth is, you don't know what just happened to them before they went to work that day. You don't know what piece of news that they just got about. As my mother used to say, it isn't always about you. And that's one of those things to understand in our communities is sometimes when people act the way that they do, we can't take it personally because what they think about us is really none of our business. And what we're thinking about them isn't important. We just are here to love them. We are here to bless them. We are here to see them in their highest potential in our mind. Then we don't make assumptions. Then we don't make assumptions and decisions. We've all made, we talked about it last week, those assumptions that we made, and we changed our life and we got things to, made some decisions, took some actions, only to find out, oh, what we just did was not based on any reality whatsoever. So therefore we had to regroup. We had to think again. But those weren't failures. Those weren't mistakes. Those were situational circumstances in the lessons of your life to show you how to get from where you are to where you say you want to be. Those lessons only repeat if we don't pay attention to the lesson. Each time something shows up and looks like a failure, a mistake, we missed the mark, don't look at it from the way of what did I do wrong? Ask the question, what did I did not see that I needed to see so that I'll never be here again? I'll never be here again. No need to beat up. That's not who we are or whose we are. It's like, show me, God. Show me what I missed. I'm a willing student. I am a willing disciple. I am willing to understand what I missed in this equation. Show me. Show me in a way that I understand. Show me in a way that I get it this time. Show me in a way that it has no adverse effect on anyone else in my life as I learn it. I don't have to take somebody else down this path with me. If we do that, if that is our come from, we have already taken dominion over our experience of how we develop, of how we grow, of how we do what we do in life. We've taken dominion over our spiritual practice. We have chosen to do it in a way that we know is going to serve us. So the question that I want to ask, and Janis, I'll call on you first to go, what was your takeaway from the chapter of the book of I Do My Best Always in the Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz?
There was so much in that particular chapter and then the following chapter. But what really struck me is, and I always say this about myself, is like my journey is about just falling asleep less and waking up faster. Because and he says this, that we're human. We're going to move through our days where we won't be impeccable with our word, where we will make assumptions. But if we are always doing our best, that's the foundation. That's what will lift us up and out of it. And it reminded me of the 4 states of consciousness, that we're always in to me, by me, through me, and as me. But in one day, we can go through all of those. And that as long as I notice that I'm there, and then, well, in this case, do my best to be responsible, do my best to move myself out of that I can move through those 4 states of consciousness, just like I can move through not being impeccable with my words, seeing that I've done that, noticing that I did it, being interested in why I did it, but spend my time in waking up rather than spending time in beating myself up with the judger and all of that. So to come out of judgment and to be more interested in my behavior, to see what's there and what that was about, and lovingly to see what was there. But to know that if I'm always trying to do my best, and that I can say that I do, I may, I'll trip up, but within that realm, at that moment in time, I was doing the best I could with what I had at the moment that I was there. So
good.
That was one of the things. And then we'll let others talk. And I have some other stuff about later on when he talks about parasites and new agreements and all of that.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Who else? What do you do in your life to do your best always? Especially when you notice you're not.
One of the things that came to mind to me is in those situations where I'm recognizing this may not be the best, but maybe it's the best in this moment that I can do. And my task is not to, as Janis was saying, to make judgments, not to go back to those boxes that were created when I was first told what to do. And to be my best under that umbrella.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Saundria, what are your thoughts?
I'm kind of from a little bit different school that believes that everybody is doing the very best job that they can in any given moment. And if they could do better, they would do better. So what I see for myself is that I will allow that to be so, and in the next moment, I can raise the bar so that that next moment I can do my best, which will be better than it was before, and just continue upward for that. And that staying in that moment and taking dominion in that moment, I don't get to have regret about the moment before, and I don't have to have fear about the moment that's coming up after. So just being in that present time, in that, and devoting attention and intention to that moment, that's the best. That's the best that I'm doing. So, and then, just getting off my own back, because I am doing the best that I can. And the worst enemy I have at times is my own critical judgment and my own beating myself up about, well, you should have, and all those old tapes about other people and how they thought they should, how they thought I should be, and how they thought I should be for myself in the future. So, yeah, that's pretty much what I feel about that.
What I like about what you said and what resonates with me is this: when I'm in it, I remember I am called to remember that they are doing their best with what they've got.
Mhm.
And if that is the truth about them, then that is the truth about me. And that's the one step forward. And oftentimes when we find ourselves locked in, stuck in the eddy, as Reverend Andriette might say, or, we're just stuck in the muck. The goal is to take one step forward out. And it's show me God, show me Spirit, what I can do to just take one step forward. And that is a way of doing my best always. One of the early talks that I gave several years ago that, sometimes as a minister or a public speaker, you give multiple talks, but throughout your career, folks will circle back and, oh, I remember that talk you gave. And it was a situation where oftentimes people will come up to me and I talk about asking the question, how do you change the direction of a waterfall? How do you think how forceful a waterfall is? Think of what that power is like. And ask your question, how do I change the direction of that waterfall? You move one rock. All you have to do is move one rock, and that will change the direction of the waterfall. And in life, when something seems so momentous to us, we think we have to come up with the total solution. We have to map it out, have the strategy, have the pros and cons all worked out, then take an action, hoping that will change. And maybe Spirit is just with, no. Just do this one little thing. Just move one rock and watch what happens. Maybe moving that one rock is saying hello first in a communication. Maybe one rock is very similar to what people used to do in what they would call the sales pitch. Do the 2 yeses to say no, or walk in and immediately find something in common. Oh, you're wearing blue today. I love blue. Blue is one of my favorite colors. You've moved one little rock to do your best in that situation. That's easy to do. You do that. Let God do the rest. Jamie, what are your thoughts?
Well, I have several. I'm trying to think, and put them together. When I make assumptions, of course, we're talking a lot about this. I make judgments about other people, about myself, and some of you already spoke about this. So oftentimes I will assume that I should know how to do something I'm trying to do, whatever it is, and then can't do it, and I get really frustrated with myself. And so if I don't check that early on, then I, become even more frustrated. So I'm starting to be able to stop and tell myself, okay, I can do something else. I can figure this out another way. And I'm doing my best at the same time, no matter what it is. If I'm making assumptions of someone else, maybe I don't understand them. As a matter of fact, we don't all think the same way. We think everybody should think this way. way I see it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
it's just a thing that we learn in our culture. So yeah, and that's the other thing is realizing that, you know, if I see somebody on TV doing something I think is ridiculous, I'll say, oh, this is ridiculous. What are you doing? And why? You should know better. And then I stop for a minute and I go, okay, so this, as the story progresses, I'm learning about these people and why they do the thing they do. And I went, okay, that makes sense. You know, I mean, take the chance to take the time to you know, to learn about, or at least try to understand what other people are doing or thinking. Then, you know, it's like, I don't know if I get this quote right from John Steinbeck. It's something about, if you know a man well, here I have part of it. If you know a man well, never leads to hate and almost always leads to love. This is to understand him. That's what it was. So
Mhm.
it's just taking, you know, time to understand people, understand myself, and you know, things of course work out much better. And asking spirit, like you mentioned, excuse me, as a way to slow myself down and go, okay, maybe I need to take a look at this. Maybe I need to see, maybe there's a reason I'm getting frustrated with myself besides judging myself, making an assumption. Maybe there's something else I need to learn. So
Mhm.
yeah, do my best always. I remember that quite a bit, you know, and just helps,
What
really helps.
what I love about what you offered is the example as we are aging forward with grace and ease in our life. There are those things that we will encounter that, oh, I should know how to do this. How can I not know how to do this? And to your point, that can lead to anxiety. That can lead to frustration. Is like, I don't know how to approach this thing. But we have resources available to us that no other generation has ever had. You can literally now go to YouTube, type in the search bar, how do I open this medicine jar? And there'll be 15 instructional videos on how to open a pill bottle. You can go to YouTube. How do I change this wire for that wire? 15 different instructors there to show you how to walk through it and explain it to you like you're in third grade. But yet we look at our life and sometimes we will want to hang out in that level of consciousness where life happens to me. And we say, I just can't learn one more thing. Well, as soon as we hear ourselves say that out loud, we got to change the dialogue and say, yes, I can. Yes, I can. And spirit, show me how. Do I need to run over to YouTube University? Do I need to call Dr. Google or Professor Wikipedia rather? And it's like, I know the answers out there because I know that I am not the first person that has had this encounter. I'm not the first person that has had to ponder, oh, do I do a will or do I do a trust? Well, my brother-in-law says, just put the house in his name and he'll take care of everything. Somehow that doesn't seem right. Let me go to Google. What's the difference between a trust and a will? And do a little due diligence on my own, you know, to kind of find out. You know, what happens if, you know, what's my responsibility? any of those questions, I, worked with a person who was newly single. They lost their spouse who had made a transition, and said, I don't even know the 10 things that I need to know about taking care of this house. Sounds like the perfect line for a Google search. What are the 10 things I need to check on my house? First one up, is your roof over 20 years old? Have your gutter, suddenly there was this checklist that she had that she could call a handyman and go, I need to check these 10 things. Take care of my house. Resources are available to us if we ask for them, but they'll never show up if we lock ourselves down in that place of life happens to me. I might as well be done with it all. Does that make sense? Does that make, okay.
Also, I don't know if I mentioned, when I do that, then, have this, understanding of myself, I find myself more compassionate with myself. And that's very lacking, I think, oftentimes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, and Janis, I think you have more insight on this than I do. Once you figure something out, once you take dominion over it, and once you watch that YouTube video and go, oh, I know how to do this, you get an endorphin rush that's very pleasing. It's like, oh, I figured this out. I got this. And that propels you to learn the next thing, to do the next thing. Not only did I figure out how to harvest my strawberries, but now I'm going to pick me some blackberries because I know I can go find out how to do the thing. And you may not have even had that thought before, because it's the chemical reaction that happens in our life when we take dominion is the electrical charge that propels us out into our life more fully. Now, that's how I would call it as a layman. How would you call it, Janis?
Well, whenever you get the dopamine hit, you're getting your neurons are firing, and your neurons are firing in a way that you remember more. So again, if it's pleased, well, if it's not pleasing, you're going to remember it. But if it's pleasing, you will be inclined to do it again and again. So you will be more practiced at it rather than repelled by it.
Exactly. And the key word that I took from what Janis said is practice. The human side of us reminds us that we're just human. We're spiritual beings having a human experience as we move through using these 4 agreements. But they have to be our practice. They have to be our intention of how we move through life. We must want to be impeccable with our word. We must want to live in a place where we do not take things personally. We must want to not make assumptions, and we must want to always do our best. What else from the reading speaks to you? What else is on your mind?
And just another point on that is there's a phrase called neurons that fire together, wire together. So the more that you practice something, you're creating neural networks that are, the positive affirmative neural networks. So the more you do it, the more you're creating a network in your brain. So.
A path, neural pathway. Yeah.
Neural pathways, yep. And it becomes networks and memories.
Yeah. But
yep.
Lillian says yes too. And I'm always reminded of the Bible verse that talks about everything happens for the good for those who love God. And I know that we are in that community. And so it takes judgment out of stuff, because if you believe that everything is happening for my good and for my highest good, then there really isn't any need to judge it as being awful and bad. If everything is for my highest and
Mhm.
everything supports me, then judgment is kind of useless.
Hmm.
You know, along the lines of the judgment as well, is that he talks a lot about the parasite or our domestication, or what race consciousness is what Ernest Holmes called it. So we live in this race consciousness, human race consciousness, and that's the parasite. And unless we do things to expunge it, unless we take action, unless we're aware and then take action and act upon it, then we are at the beck and call of that parasite. So, which I, it's like, parasite inside me. I don't like that idea. But what it does for me is it says, this is something that is not your character. This is something that is not your soul. This is something that you have taken in knowingly or unknowingly that you can expunge. And therefore, it's not me. It's just,
Mhm.
it's ideas and perspectives and things that I can release, rather than it being who I am, whose I am, my soul and my character. So it takes away a lot of the judgment when I look at it that way. It's like, oop, where did I learn that?
What I'm reminded of, and I love this metaphor, the teaching symbol for the philosophy, the science of mind philosophy, is the open funnel. And in a simplistic way, is what you put in manifests out the bottom. But in the center of it is this place where we must tend, as a gardener would, to our garden. And I can remember, the once or two times I went to a farm as a child, that you would be walking through this cornfield and you would see this anomaly of a tomato plant growing up in the middle of the stalk of the corn. And I would ask my grandfather, well, how did this tomato plant get over here in the middle of the corn? And he goes, oh, those pesky sparrows. And just look up to the sky. Well, I didn't know what he meant by the pesky sparrows, as the answer to that question. So when I got home, I asked the question again, and my mom would explain to me, well, the sparrow was overeating a tomato in the tomato patch and got a seed and flew over and dropped the seed into the corn pasture. And so that's why that plant grew up there. The farmer has to go in and weed that tomato plant out of their garden. He didn't plant it there. He didn't put that in his funnel of what he wanted to manifest in his life. So that parasite is the same thing. We may not have put it there. It may be, a belief that was put there by the religious organization we grew up under, or it might be a seed that was planted by a parent or a sibling that didn't have our highest and best, for us. But once we recognize, oh, this doesn't belong here, it's on us to weed it out. That's what we are removing from our spiritual work that we do on a day-to-day basis. We're always tending to the garden. We're always going, ooh, boy, that was out. I gotta forgive me of that. I'm not going to say that aloud as I pull onto the freeway. Ooh, I'm not going to say that when I got hung up on. What else?
Oh, can I on the spiritual symbol that
Yes.
coming down, what the V coming down is what we're taking in, but the V going up is what we're giving back. So as we clear ourselves, we're pushing back into the intelligence, into the limitless intelligence, a whole different perspective that can then be drawn down by others. So that's what the V is. It's the coming down and then the bringing up of, but the idea is that the more that we can clear ourselves of the parasites, we are doing it for others as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What else?
Gwen just texted me that her computer died
Oh,
because we lost her.
okay. Send her a text and let her know that she can watch the video on the website later. But that'll be good. Anything else? Janice has something that we're going to end with this evening and talk about just a little bit on the other side of it. But anything else specifically about any of the 4 agreements before we move to the next thing?
Can you talk a little bit about making new agreements? Like there are the 4 agreements, and then there are the agreements that we are constantly making with ourselves. Or are you going to move in? Am I jumping the gun?
I was not going to move into that, but I thank you for planning that idea. What I was going to offer in my teaching is to really kind of continue and hold sacred any new agreements that we enter. Because one of the things that I would invite us to know is that we're always making agreements.
Mm-hmm.
We're always making agreements. We make an agreement with ourselves. Oh, I'm going to go to bed by 11 o'clock because I got to get up early in the morning, you know, and then if we don't, we have a broken agreement. We always are making agreements with the value based on the values that we're operating on in life. So for example, I often talk about my personal values are love and compassion, you know, and spontaneity is one of them that came to my mind. So I can immediately recognize that I am out of agreement when whatever I'm doing isn't lifting up one of my personal values. I had a dear friend by the name of Patricia, who was a personal awareness trainer, very successful in life, who would often confront people on a non-disclosed, renegotiated agreement. And what she meant by that is you and I had an agreement to have lunch at noon on Friday. I'm there at 10 to 12, looking at the menu, thinking about what I'm going to have. And you show up at 12:20. You have created a non-negotiated agreement. You've just changed the agreement, especially if you show up unapologetically, or if you show up and offer a story that really shows me that you didn't value keeping your original agreement with me. I'm sorry I'm late. I just decided this morning I was going to treat myself and get my hair done. So I'm sorry I'm late. Really? You've shown me that that hair appointment was more important than your appointment with me, because you didn't call me to say, can we do 12:30? You didn't call me to say, I'm running a little bit late. So it is a non-negotiated agreement that you're operating from. They've made the assumption that we're okay with it, but we get to look at what we're doing with that. So I kind of went down a lane, but the lane that I want to get back to is before we agree to anything, before we enter any agreement, take that time out.
Yeah.
This is a sacred exchange that I'm about to engage in. This is because it includes another God being. This is a holy encounter. This is a sacred moment. You know, as Saundria said, we understand they're doing the best that they can. We are demonstrating what is our personal best by how we enter that agreement. And we hold every new agreement as something sacred. We have to understand the intention behind the agreement. And I think about the agreement that Gary and I made back in the Marin Civic Center after the thing with Terry Cole-Whittaker. I was able to entertain and accept and enter that sacred agreement when he said, and I don't want to do this without you. I was in. I was in because I could trust the agreement. I could trust his intention for entering agreement with me was for my highest and best and for our highest and best in our friendship. What else would you offer about any new agreements now that you're moving forward and have studied the 4 agreements?
You know what it makes me think of, and is that especially in my life now, is that I don't do let's do lunch anymore with people, where we say it, and I don't know if you've had that experience where you see somebody and you're constantly saying let's do lunch, and it never happens, and then you realize that it's because you really don't want to have lunch with that person. So there's been times where I'm saying, you know what, I'm not going to say let's do lunch because we never do it. And just, you know, it's something to really look at when I'm just talking or when I'm really feeling and talking. I don't know if that makes sense, but let's do lunch.
It makes total sense. It makes total sense. And I'm reminded of my friend Vera, whose response, whenever if I had $1 for every time I heard her say this in response to that very comment, oh, we should have lunch. I would love that. Call me when you're ready.
Yeah.
And when she and I have talked about it kind of on the side, she said, it takes it off of me. Because when the person says, we should have lunch, I almost want to get it on me like, oh, I should have called them. It's up to me to make this happen. And they're holding me accountable to it. But no, love to do that. Call me when you're ready. This is the very same woman who taught me she never waited more than 10 minutes for anyone at a restaurant.
But it's also being truthful about making agreement, like really stopping and looking at it, being impeccable with our word.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what it is. It's kind of like somebody says something and we want them to like us or whatever. So we're making new agreements with them that we would, and we both know that it's not going to happen. Therefore, you know, what did we create in that? We created some kind of lie bubble.
Well, and my biggest pet peeve about being a male in the gay community is nobody would make an agreement just in case something better came along. You know, let's go to the movies Friday night and see this new film. Okay, I'll put that down. And if Joe doesn't call, we'll go. Hello. No, I'm gonna go, and I had to find my own emancipation in that, and basically said, "Oh, let me say it differently. I'm going to be at the Grand Lake Theater at 8 o'clock on Friday night to see the movie. Love to have you join me, but I'm going to be there, you know, to take dominion over it." But it's looking at how casually we enter what I would call the pencil in agreement.
Mm-hmm.
Hold the space and maybe. No, let's do the thing.
Yeah.
Let's do the thing. And if we need to renegotiate, that's okay. But let's not make assumptions and assume that the renegotiation is okay. What else?
Well,
Janice,
one
I
of
think
the-
it's time for a little Harold.
Oh,
Howard.
Howard.
I said Harold. Howard.
I think most of you or many of you will know The Moments of My High Resolve by Howard Thurman. This last chapter made me really think about, it's like we're human, we're gonna fall asleep, but as long as we can wake up and remember what our commitment is to life. So this is Howard Thurman. Keep
Yes.
fresh before me the moments of my high resolve. Despite the dullness and barrenness of the days that pass, if I search with due diligence, I can always find a deposit left by some former radiance. But I've forgotten. At the time, it was fully orbed, glorious, and resplendent. I was sure that I would never forget. In the moment of its fullness, I was sure it would illume my path for the rest of my journey. I had forgotten how easy it is to forget. There was no intent to betray what seemed to be sure at the time. My response was whole, clean, authentic, but little by little there crept into my life the dust and grit of the journey. Details, lower level demands, all kinds of cross currents, nothing momentous, nothing overwhelming, nothing flagrant, just wear and tear. If there'd been some direct challenge, a clear-cut issue, I would have fought it to the end and beyond. In the quietness of this place, surrounded by the all-pervading presence of God, my heart whispers, keep fresh before me the moments of my high resolve, that in fair weather or in foul, in good times or in tempests, in the days when darkness and the foe are nameless or familiar, I may not forget that to which my life is committed. Keep fresh before me the moments of my high resolve.